Dys4ia is an autobiographical single-player flash game created by Anna Anthropy in 2012, detailing her experience with gender dysphoria as she transitions to become a woman. Anna Anthropy focuses more on the storytelling aspects rather than gameplay in this medium, as the gameplay mechanics are fairly simple and easy to navigate using only the arrow keys. The game uses the classical 8-bit art style as the main aesthetic and implements it into gameplay and narrative. She uses this art style to drive the message that she doesn't feel like she quite fits into a box. In several recurring sequences, players have to navigate a block that resembles a tetronomo into a line, and each time the sequence is shown, a certain attribute changes to mirror the changes she herself undergoes. The game is separated into 4 levels that each elaborates on a different experience throughout her transition. The first level of the game is titled Gender Bullshit. In it, she describes the feeling of being alienated. She details not feeling accepted by the so-called feminist, not fitting into the clothes she wants to wear, being constantly labeled as a man, the struggle to correct those that do, and the embarrassment of using the women's washroom knowing how judgmental people can be. All of these situations ultimately lead her to the decision to undergo hormonal treatment. In the second level titled Medical Bullshit, Anna Anthropy describes her journey to begin the treatment. In this level, she discovers that this journey will bear its own trials and tribulations she must overcome. The third level, Hormonal Bullshit. In the third level, Hormonal Bullshit, Anna Anthropy recounts the ordeal she faces as she finally starts the treatment, as well as the changes her body begins to experience. In this level, players encounter some of the physical changes that she went through, as well as the physical toll it took on her body. Lastly, the level It Gets Better depicts the change Anna Anthropy sees from an internal and external level. In this chapter, Anna Anthropy shares with the players the acceptance she received from her family, the way the world has changed its outlook on her, and ultimately, the confidence she gains. This chapter acts as a message of hope to players who might be going through the same experience.
The game's narrative is presented from the perspective of its creator. The narrative style is text-based, and we never actually see or hear the narrator through the duration of the game. The creator has written text that guides the player through the game, and this is presented on the screen. The text will often guide players and give hints as to what they should do next. As the game goes on, we learn more about the narrator's obstacles and how they work to overcome them. Because of this, we begin to empathize with them and root for their success. This relates to a concept presented in one of the readings, He Could Be a Bunny Rabbit for All I Care, by Adrienne Shaw. And this is the idea of game players feeling either sameness identity or empathic identity towards a character. Players of this game, Dys4ia, will not always feel as if they have taken on the identity or persona of the character, but they will more often than not feel an emotional connection to the character and hope for good things to happen to them. Thus, players of this game will often fall into the category of empathic identity. In The Fundamentals of Game Design by Ernest Adams, Adams says, the goal of character design is to create characters that people find appealing, that people can believe in, and that the player can identify with. Players may have seen the character as their proxy, but they did not necessarily identify with the character in an emotional and distanced way. Thus, Dys4ia succeeds in doing something that many games struggle to do, and that's to create an emotional bond between the player and the game's characters. The narration progresses chronologically as the player moves forward through the game. At the beginning, we are introduced to the creator's problems, struggling with body image, being misgendered, having to constantly shave, and dealing with public washrooms. As the game progresses, the game tells us that the creator has been prescribed to go on hormones, and how this slowly begins to help solve some of their problems. Thus, the game follows a fairly linear and time-based progression. In regards to interactivity, the game gives the player pretty much zero choice or control over the outcome. The player is essentially forced down a path that leads to only one outcome at the conclusion of the game. This could be due to the fact that the creator is intending to tell a personal story through their own eyes. The creator wants to lead the player to one ending rather than giving the player enough control to alter the story and its outcome in order to make it their own. This style works well for the purpose of this game. When the creator is trying to tell a story that leads to one outcome, it better suits them to keep it simple and have only one possible path for players to take. The game would look and feel a lot different if there were ways for the player to diverge from the norm and possibly fail a level or even lose the game. However, this is not possible given the way the game is currently constructed. From the reading, Walking and Wiring the Land, Indigenous Art Practice in Games. Elizabeth Laponce and Vicky Mulder discuss the concept of giving players cues that they are on the right track. They say, as players progress by using the correct movements, they are gifted with audio and visual rewards. Since the reward for getting the physical movements on par involves the scenes changing, it was important for the art to be playful, dynamic, and realistic all at once. This concept relates to this game, Dys4ia. Anytime the player gets a movement correct and moves to the next stage, they are shown bright and stunning artwork along with audio signals that they have done something correctly and are moving in the right direction. Also from the readings, Shaw says, the games industry conducts games and audiences view games as responsive to players' wishes. This responsiveness is often used by both groups to distinguish between games and other media. This game is certainly less responsive to player commands than many others.
So, as I was playing through the game, I noticed that although I hadn't yet completed the task, the game moved along to the next part of the story. And this really took me out of the game because I felt like my actions didn't really have an impact on the actual outcome of the game. So this got me to thinking, should I even consider this a game? So I went back to some of the earlier weeks of class to see if there was evidence that this actually should be considered a game. I mean, obviously I know it's a game, but trying to prove it with different theories is a different story. So it doesn't fall under game according to Kawa, as it is not open to player innovation, and I didn't really see it falling under any of the other forms of play except maybe mimicry, but even that felt like a stretch. It also doesn't apply to suits definition either, because there is no way to make the game more difficult or harder. And finally, we got to one that can sort of apply, which is games as structure of feeling. Something that actually sort of lines up with the game. However, this is a very blanket term, and I didn't feel that this was enough to categorize Dys4ia as a legitimate game. Jumping forward to some Week 8 content, we looked at the 4 main categories of games, and unfortunately I didn't find my answer here either, mostly because the game is not engaging or challenging, so to me it didn't really fit anywhere on the plane. Honestly, the game is what I would have called back in the day as a face roll. A face roll means that you could roll your face around on the keyboard and you could still win. So at last, after leaving no rock unturned, I found the closest thing I'll get to an answer, and this is the game as experience model, which says that the value is in the real world experience that the game provides. Which does apply to Dys4ia, sort of. The only reason I'm hesitant to put it in this category is that it specifies real-world experience, and because the game is in 8-bit, I'm not sure if this would count, unless it's not referring specifically to real-world experience, but rather representing real-world experience. Then I think it would count. But at this point, I would like to pass it off to everyone else. Do you think Dys4ia should be considered a game? And if so, why? Yeah, that's all from us. Thank you guys for watching.